Welcome to Vocab Unit 1. Your first root is a or an, which means not or without. And your first word is agnostic. It means believing that the existence of God is unknown and unknowable. So if you look at this picture over here, we have a question mark over a picture of Jesus. So someone who's agnostic believes that we can't know whether there's a God or not. So they don't have faith in a God, but they're also not sure that there isn't one. They think it's just impossible to know. Your second definition for agnostic over here means having a doubtful or non-committal attitude towards something. So you can use agnostic in contexts that don't have to do with religion, so you're uncertain about something that's not religion. But again, usually it's used in terms of not knowing whether God exists. And then you just have here the fact that it can also be a noun, so you can refer to an agnostic person simply as an agnostic. You have a bunch of synonyms here. Unbelieving is a good one. And for antonyms, believing would be a good word to help you remember. The opposite of agnostic. Someone who believes in God is not agnostic. A helpful hint just gives you the difference here between an agnostic person and an atheist. So an agnostic person believes the existence of God is unknowable, whereas an atheist denies the existence of God. So an atheist would say there is no God, an agnostic would say we just don't know. Your sample sentence: after the string of tragedies in her life, her faith in her religion was shaken and she began to see herself as agnostic. So she was no longer sure whether a God existed. Your second a or an word is anomaly, and it means something unusual, odd, or unexpected, or an incongruity or inconsistency. So it's something weird. So if you look at the picture over here, there's this black acorn in the middle. It's different from all the others. So that acorn is an anomaly. It's something that isn't quite normal. Your synonyms: oddity is a good one. It's something odd. And for your antonym, something that shows normality would not be an anomaly. In your sample sentence, the students grew used to the routine of their schedule pretty quickly and were thrown off by any anomaly like park testing or snow days. So something that's different in your schedule or your routine would be an anomaly. So having testing in the middle of your day would be an anomaly. It's not something that's normal. Your next root is a suffix. It's or, and it means one who does. So you see it on the end of instigator. Instigator is one who instigates. And the definition of instigator is someone or something that starts a fight or stirs up trouble. Or secondly, it could be someone or something that provokes a response. So an instigator starts something. So an instigator of a fight would be the person who starts it. The instigator of a debate would be the one who starts the debate. The synonym troublemaker here is helpful in remembering that. And your sample sentence: the defenseman wasn't the most talented player, but he was a skilled instigator and could make almost any opponent lose his cool. So he was kind of the one that got things started on the field. Your second word with the OR root is purveyor. And your definition is a person, organization, etc. that supplies food and provisions, right? So it supplies something. So this picture down here of berries might be showing the supplies of a berry purveyor. Someone who supplies berries, a purveyor of berries. And your second definition is a person who spreads, repeats, or sells something. Synonyms: a supplier is a good one. And for your helpful hint, this is a good structure to know. So you usually have a purveyor of something. So here you have a purveyor of goods. A purveyor of truth would be someone that spreads truths. Again, we have the purveyor of berries over there. And your sample sentence is: after a long, successful career as an English teacher, the man retired, bought a store on Main Street, and became a purveyor of used books. So someone who supplies used books. Your next root is inter, which means between. And your first word is intermittent, which means alternatively stopping and starting again. So if you think about intermittent beeping would mean that there's a beep that kind of comes and goes, or it beeps every 2 minutes. It's not a regular sound. So your synonym is irregular, and your antonym is constant. The helpful hint also applies to this nice picture over here. So it tells you may have heard of intermittent windshield wiper blades. That's when the wipers pause for a few seconds before wiping the windshield again. That should be a few. Your sample sentence is, your success as a poet was intermittent. She sometimes had wildly successful stretches, while at other times she couldn't produce anything good. So again, intermittent is something that occurs every so often or occasionally. Your next word is intervene. Intervene means to come between disputing people or groups to stop the dispute or intercede. Synonyms, again, as a verb, would be to referee, to mediate, or to arbitrate. So if you come in between people who are fighting, you are intervening. And the antonyms are overlook and condone, which are both ignoring something that's happening instead of intervening and stopping it. The helpful hint says, if you have ever heard of people speak of having an intervention, that is the noun form. They are intervening between someone and their harmful situation. And your sample sentence, the two neighboring countries were getting aggressive and several international organizations had to intervene to prevent a border war. So there were countries that were about to fight and the organizations intervened or came between them to stop the war. And over here with this picture you have a hand intervening to stop the dominoes from continuing to fall down. Your next word is mal, which means bad or evil. And your first word is maladroit, which means unskillful, awkward, or bumbling. So if you look over here at this disaster, it looks like a maladroit person has knocked over a coffee mug. So someone who's clumsy or trips down the stairs could be described as maladroit. Your synonym, one of them is clumsy, and an antonym would be graceful. You don't tip over coffee mugs. Your sample sentence says, although he was an excellent singer and could speak 4 languages, Clarence was embarrassingly maladroit at athletic competitions. So he's clumsy and inept at anything athletic, despite his other talents. Your next word is malnutrition. Malnutrition means the lack of proper nourishment or inadequate diet. So splitting this word, you can see that, right? Mal would be bad, nutrition, so not getting good nutrition. Synonyms are malnourishment and starvation, and the antonym is nourishment. Your sample sentence, on his 3rd day stranded in the desert without any food, Elroy began to worry about the mental effects of malnutrition. And over here you have a cat that is very skinny, might be suffering from malnutrition. Your next word is nov, which means new, and your first word is novelty. A few definitions for this one. The first is the state of being new, original, or unusual. So you'd often say the novelty of something. So you might say that people were drawn to this car show because of the novelty of doors that open unlike most other car doors. Or looking down at, skipping a little bit to these helpful hints down here, the novelty of freshman year. So you had the novelty of something that's new and exciting, is usually how that's used. The second definition is a new occurrence. So if you look at the second helpful hint down here, ice cream for breakfast was a novelty. Or you would say with these car doors, those car doors are a novelty, right? So it is something that's new. Your third definition is something whose value is decorative and whose appeal is temporary. So a novelty is usually something that's exciting because it's sort of new and different, but not particularly useful. So if those car doors don't work very well, you might say, oh, they're just a novelty. And it's often used, if you look at down this third definition, in terms of little baubles and things that aren't really useful. So the gift shop sold various novelties. So you also hear that in terms of novelty items sometimes. If you go to a gift shop on vacation, they might be trying to sell you little novelties that you don't really need. Going back up to the synonyms, newness is a good one. And then for that third, this is for the third definition actually, a trinket or a bauble would be those little things that are sold in the tourist stores. And your antonyms are sameness or oldness. Sample sentence. If you're getting swept away by the latest iPad game craze, give it a few months and the novelty will eventually wear off. You also hear that often with the novelty will wear off. It won't be new and exciting anymore. All right, novice is a much more straightforward word. It means a beginner, or as an adjective means inexperienced. So you can say that soccer player is a novice, or you can say that's a novice soccer player. And these might be novice flag football players over here, right? They're kids, so they're pretty new to the sport. So you'd say they're novice football players, which is why they're playing flag football instead of tackle football. A good synonym is an amateur, and as an adjective, you also have really similar ones, right? So you could say like that soccer player is an amateur, that soccer player is a novice. Similarly, that's a novice soccer player, or that's an amateur soccer player. And as antonyms, if you are a professional, you are not a novice. Sample sentence, even the greatest musicians all began as novices, struggling to avoid mistakes. Your next root is logi, which means the study of. And your first word is ideology. An ideology is a belief system that guides a person or group. Your synonym is belief, so really you're looking at that idea that an ideology is a belief system. So if you look over here, this is an example of one ideology that you might live by. It says, life is always better when we are together. So any kind of motto or words to live by, if you really believe them and really live by those words, that could be your ideology. The sample sentence says, because his personal ideology was based on mutual trust in the goodness of man, Jason rarely worried about getting mugged and accidentally put himself in dangerous situations. Right? So his ideology was that every person is good, so he trusts everyone. Or your personal ideology might be that hard work leads to success, so you always work hard. So it's kind of what you live by, your belief system. Your next word is psychology, which is the science of the mind. So psychology is something that you could study. So psychologists study psychology. You could take psychology classes in college. Your helpful hint is that psychology can also be used to mean mindset, such as the psychology of a teenager, right? So, and again, the psychology of a teenager is something that could be studied. The sample sentence is, just because he had taken an introductory college course in psychology, Dan felt he could understand what everyone was feeling and how they felt it. Your next root is which means again. And your first word is recrimination, which is the act of making a countercharge against one's accuser. So if you look at this, you have which is again. So this is the second accusation that's been made, right? So someone has made one accusation, and then you come back at them with a recrimination. And if you look, you also have that crime root, so it's like you're charging them with a crime, right? So someone says, you did this to me, and then you throw back the recrimination, no, you started it, you did this first. Your synonyms, I like counterattack or counter-accusation, right? So someone accuses you of something, you counter-accuse. Your sample sentence. After Abby had sued her former employers for wrongful termination, the company sued her in an act of recrimination, right? So Abby sues her company then comes back and sues her, and it is an act of recrimination. This is a good way to use it with that act of recrimination. And your next word is rehash, which means to discuss over and over again without substantial change. So if you've ever been at a meeting where you feel like everyone is talking about the same thing over and over and over and over again, you could say that they were rehashing the same issue. Or if you have the same argument with a friend or the same argument with a parent over and over again, you're rehashing the same issue. Repeat is, I think, a good one for that definition. Your sample sentence is, the committee stopped paying attention at the meeting when John began to rehash his same old concerns about the safety of the fire escapes. So rehash has kind of a negative connotation to it, where it's not a good thing to rehash the same thing over and over again. You're usually judging someone and saying, I don't really want to hear this again, if you say they're rehashing something. Your next root is which means before, and your first word is precursor. A precursor is a person or thing that precedes, as in a job, a method, etc., which sounds a little bit confusing, but it's the person who or thing that comes first. So if you look at over here, we've got the little evolution chain, right? So this monkey is this precursor to this maybe caveman, who's the precursor to this caveman, who's the precursor to that one, who's the precursor to modern people, right? So whatever comes before is the precursor, because pre means before. Your second definition is something that goes before and indicates the approach of someone or something else. So the way that I like to remember that is rain clouds being a precursor to a rainstorm. So when you see rainstorms, when you see clouds, you think, oh, that must be a precursor to the rainstorm. I'm going to take out my umbrella. Your synonyms, you have forerunner over here or herald over there. And your sample sentence is the Laserdisc did not last long, but was an important precursor to the CD and the DVD. So this is another good way to use it in thinking about technology, of what older phone was the precursor to a later phone, etc. Your next word is presumption, which is an assumption that something is true, usually on reasonable grounds or probable evidence. So you see that presumption looks a lot like assumption, so that should really help you to remember that word. And also with that pre-root, you know that it's something you assume before you are certain that something is true. Hypothesis is a good synonym, and fact is an antonym that they give you. It's not fact, even though you can be pretty confident that you're right. So the helpful hints are presumption of guilt. Presumption can also used to mean an attitude that is boldly arrogant. So it's not a compliment to say that someone was presumptive or made assumptions before knowing the truth. Your sample sentence. After seeing the familiar crime scene, the police chief called Doug in for questioning based on the presumption that Doug still hadn't changed his ways since the last 3 times he was arrested. So the police saw a crime scene and presumed or made the presumption that it was a certain person. All right, that is all for this unit. Happy studying.